Financial Services and Investments, who was charged with going out and beating the brushes and bringing in investors. And when those investors came in, we had, on the domestic front, we had the creation of the Domestic Investment Board, which was intended to better facilitate Bahamians into going into business. We had, in around 2005, we made available an additional $25 million to the Bahamas Development Bank for them to lend to Bahamians to get into business. We made it available to them to draw down on. We had the creation of the Venture Capital Fund, where persons who could not go to the banks or the traditional financial institutions had this source of financing. And then we had some efforts to bring the Bahamas Development Bank and the BAIC into closer cooperation. And so we see that the plan was, number one, we bring in the investors, but we don't stop there. We had real initiatives, Domestic Investment Board, additional monies to the Bahamas Development Bank, the Venture Capital Fund, to make available to Bahamians. And so we had tourism driving more Bahamians into business, and the next step would be more spin-off businesses and diversification.
Mr. Deputy Leader, Mr. Davis, why was it so difficult to sell this vision that Mr. Christie talked about and what Mr. Alquitas just spoke about? Why was it so difficult to sell that to the Bahamian people? Did they really appreciate that the PLP did have a vision?
I think that if there's one flaw in our administration during 2002 and 2007, it was that we were unable to get our message to the Bahamian people the way we ought to have. There was a lot of initiatives that you would have heard that were put in place that they just did not know about, and they didn't quite appreciate the vision that we had for the country. And I think we could take fault for that, in that we were unable to get our message to our people, because I'm sure if they knew what was on the table, what was happening, they would not have voted us out.
Okay, let me just say something. I began by saying that vision must embrace the entire country. You heard people talking about Nassau-centric policies that are geared for new provenance. When we came to power, we recognized that if we're going to succeed in creating a local economy in as many islands as possible to arrest this drift to new provenance, to balance the population as it were, to ensure that we have a return on the infrastructure, all common fundamental aspects of economics, that we had to do some things. We went into Inagua, found out that the FNM had left pipes in the ground, no water for the people. Inagua has the largest colony of flamingos and other 100 species of birds, and therefore are natural for ecotourism. So Mr. Roberts then went and put running water, fresh water, potable water in Inagua. We did the same thing in South Eleuthera and Central Eleuthera, leaving only the Rock Sound area to do it. We did the same thing in San Salvador. And in other words, in Long Island, recognizing that vision. We lighted up 23 airstrips throughout the Bahamas. We knew we were trying to introduce national health insurance. We knew a fundamental aspect of national health insurance was to bring people in. The only way you could do that is have the flights out there. So we actually then lit up these airstrips all over the Bahamas. Then look, what did we do, Mr. Jones? We decided that we had to engage in some policies that will allow investors to go out into those islands. And so we created this whole aspect that is now discussed about incentives, incentivizing investment out there, giving concessions.
Assuming that foreign direct investment for the time being is not happening, and some people say it is passé, what should be done to stimulate direct or domestic investment in our country? And what is the plan of the PLP?
Mr. Jones, if I can be permitted to answer that. We hear a lot of talk about the recession. Where's all the money going? Somebody taking it and put it in their pocket? Somebody dig a hole and put it there? The money is there. During the Christie administration, we attracted unprecedented levels of foreign investment. The people, I saw with my own two eyes how they love Mr. Christie. I don't get that impression that the investors love Mr. Ingram. That is the problem. He is the impediment. We need somebody who can sell the Bahamas. And Christie is the man who can sell the Bahamas. He's done it before, and he will do it again.
It's as simple as that. You know, there are some people who believe, Mr. Alkitis and Mr. Davis, that we should go back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals being to rely on ourselves, and that Bahamians ought to be empowered to take control of the economy of the Bahamas, and that there has been an over-reliance on the foreign investor that Mr. Roberts spoke about.
I think we will have to do that thing, that more of that self-reliance by necessity. Because, for example, if you look at what's going on in the United States, Mr. Obama is bringing in new financial regulations for his financial sector. The question we ask is, will that make it even more difficult? In addition to the recession, would this new regulatory framework make it more difficult for persons to invest overseas, for example? So by necessity, we will be pushed into more of a self-reliant situation. I spoke earlier about, you know, in the speech from the throne, the government says that they're going to abolish the hotel corporation. Well, back in the 1970s, the hotel corporation was formed to preserve Bahamian jobs during the time of recession. Now, perhaps we don't do things the same way, but can we use that as a vehicle to develop our industry by pooling our resources? It's a question that needs to be asked and something that needs to be investigated.
Mr. Jones, you know, the Progressive Party is about creating a Bahamas that is safer and secure for each and every Bahamian citizen. It is also about ensuring that each and every Bahamian citizen reaches and is able, right, to exercise its potential, or his or her potential and expertise, and providing the opportunities for that to happen. To do that, we have to ensure that we inspire our Bahamian people. We have to give them the hope. We have to, just like the perennial basketball coach, ensure that he gets the best out of the talents he has. And Mr. Christie is one person we are assured that can get people to do things. He is the ultimate coach who can get the best out of his talents.
Let's deal with some...
I should admit something, though. You know, you raised the question about whether we were poor in our communicating to the people of the country, because the bottom line is, it's not only about doing good things, it's about getting people to agree you did good things. And that is where I think was our greatest failure, in communicating to the people. Do you know, for example, that we privatize air routes throughout the Bahamas? That Western Air exists as a scheduled carrier, Sky Bahamas as a scheduled carrier, Pineapple as a scheduled carrier, because we opened the airways, Cat Island Air as a scheduled carrier, we opened the airwaves. We never even said that to people. We never took credit for it. Just as we left in place a commitment for a privatized BTC, that when Ingram came to power, the first thing he said, this is some bad, corrupt deal with Bradley Roberts and his crew, which was a total condemnable lie, okay? And we left in place $260 million off on the table, and they haven't been able to privatize now because they just cannot get any kind of money like that. And when you ask how could we have handled ourselves during a recessionary period, well, he had access to $260 million to be able to offset the borrowing that he's done, to be able to ease the pain of people who are out there. So when I talk about governance, I'm talking about judgment, making the right decision. They talk about me and deliberation. Deliberation means that you give consideration to the issues, and you ask Jack and James and John, who are Bahamian experts, what do you think?
As Paulette Zonical said, the government has consulted on the gambling issue. I understand that there is a promise of a referendum. Where's the PLP on this? There are many PLPs who want to gamble, you know.
No, I mean, the PLP reflects the views of the population. And my initial comments were that I was not intending to put a whip on PLPs, it was going to be similar to capital punishment. That if we went to debate, okay, and this was prior to our sitting down as a group, that we went to debate, there's some church members in our group who were fundamentally opposed, and there's some in our group who was for it. And so I understood as leader that I had the responsibility to balance it. But in
So you were for a referendum?
In more recent times, right from the floor of this council on Thursday night, the recommendation came, which we agreed